Exceptional Radio.
We've got stuff. We've got lots to talk about, actually.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
So, I've got this weird gripe about this. It's like a power strip, but I call it like a power tower because it has 6 USB ports, 3 of which are like, I think like 2 or 3 amp. So they can charge a phone relatively quickly, but it has 3 that are pretty normal, just like milliamp USB. And then it has 4 normal 3-prong outlets. And I love this thing, except for the 6 USB cords that I've got coming out of it. It's like a I'm not even sure what it's like an alien. These cables just spew out from this thing, and no matter how much I try to keep them aligned and organized, within a few minutes of just using my desk, these things will be braided into this crazy nest. And I'm not quite sure why it happens, but it happens it's like a consistent thing that I've always had to like fight on a desk. And so part of me is really looking forward to this world where everything is powered over the air, like through induction, or maybe in some kind of enhanced neutrino field power delivery system that hasn't been invented yet. But man, I will be so happy when cable clutter just isn't even a thing. Like it's mentioned in engineering textbooks for talking about how to keep things organized, like from a historical perspective, so that future designs aren't just cables everywhere. And these aren't even big cables. Like audio cables are huge compared to USB cords. Like an audio snake can be, however many channels it's carrying, and those things can get pretty massive really quickly. And then like real power cables are fucking huge. But I would never have those on my desk. Those always get routed somewhere. But like USB cables can't do anything about it.
I mean, I suppose you could tape stuff down on the desk. That's like the most common thing I've seen with audio cables at scale.
Yeah. With audio stuff, I run them under the desk, and they stay out of the way. But things like
right, but even then, it would have to be taped down so they don't end up mixing with each other. Because it's like if you just, for whatever reason, if you just let cables sit next to each other without binding them somehow, they're gonna mix.
Oh yeah, well, crosstalk is a thing, and induction fields are a thing, and it's crazy how even shielded and balanced cables that are designed to reject interference will just like, if they're too close to a wall wart or something, that changes everything.
Well, that too, but I was just thinking like physically, like they're gonna get entangled. It's like wires for whatever reason just tend to entangle with themselves, and it's like you can have even one wire, and if you don't restrain, it's gonna somehow end up with a knot, and you're like, how the fuck did this even happen? This is plugged in on both ends. How is there a knot in the middle for something that's been sitting there? And it's like, I don't know if it's the electricity or the whatever current flowing through it that's causing it to shift, but yeah, I fucking hate wires.
I've been watching a bunch of
get frustrated with them because if you rip them, then your shit's gonna fucking break.
Oh yeah,
it's like
I've been watching a bunch of like World War II movies, and one of them, it's like up in the clouds, I think. It's a gremlin story. There's a freaking gremlin tearing apart a plane, and it just made me think like, man, there's got to be some little like desk gremlin that lives.
Is that the one with Will Shatner?
No. What's her name? I can't remember her name. No, that's definitely not it.
The Twilight Zone.
Shadow in the Cloud.
Oh, there's a Nightmare at 20,000 Feet
No,
where
this one is.
Will Shatner.
Oh yeah, the Outer Limits, or
No, it's
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be his best performance ever. But yeah, like the Gremlin, that's like a thing. That's not just a. It's not just limited to airplanes. They're like gremlins in all sorts of. I mean, as the mythology goes, gremlins are just this thing that exists that cause things to break, right?
I mean,
Yeah, an imaginary imp jokingly said to be responsible for the malfunctions in machinery. Any mischievous troublemaker. And that's the dictionary definition.
yeah, but I don't know how long that's been like popular because I feel like that might have come into more recent popularity
Yeah.
and gone out of popularity.
Oh, it's a convention of the 20th century.
Yeah.
So it has origins in aviation. So maybe it really just it's a dying thing as machines become like controlled by microcontrollers that are using integrated circuits and complex processing. Where, yeah, I'm not sure that can gremlins live at or survive at the like, the atomic level. Atomic level gremlins working to. I guess that would be like some kind of micro machine. Atomic scale nanites destroying processors.
But then that wouldn't.
That's like way too. That's like super science fiction level. No,
Well, yeah, but I feel like part of the idea of the gremlin is that there's this mythical being associated with it that's, somewhat menacing. And I feel like the nanites kind of lose that.
yeah. Now, nanites can only affect other machines, right? Unless they're bio nanite. I guess a machine could fuck up a human real seriously if they wanted to.
Oh, definitely. I mean, especially
Just go short circuit somewhere in the brain.
micro. I mean, not you don't even have to be that complex. You can just have a few micro machines block somebody's arteries. Um, and
Excrete a toxin as a natural process of operation.
yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of ways you could use nanites to kill people. Um, I think that, but at that same time, it's like unnecessary.
Yeah.
It's like over
No, that's
reaching
over.
around your head like 17 times to scratch your nose, not just once.
That's really over engineering how to do something like that.
And then you get to shit where like the drone attacks don't work. Exploding cigars don't work.
Exploding cigars.
I think there's a point where assassinations are more about attrition than the methodology. And even then, sometimes they just don't even work, which,
Yeah, like when the power vacuum makes way for somebody who's actually worse.
well, I mean, I'm just saying sometimes they're unsuccessful no matter how many times they try to kill a person, whether it's like stabbing or shooting at them or trying to poison them or exploding fucking cigar. Like and it's like Castro's not the only one. There have been other people who've had multiple failed assassination attempts of different types on their person. Where again, it's like some people just whatever it is, they don't. No method of assassination is successful on their person, and in other cases, it's like, the first attempt is successful. So I think that's where um,
Operation Mongoose.
the ones that are successful are the ones that are in the public mind or the social consciousness more frequently and more often. But the ones that have multiple attempts that fail, it's like it's easy to forget like somebody attempted to kill fucking Ronald Reagan
Yeah.
because it didn't work. So it's like the ones where it didn't work, it's like easy. Or what's that? Gabby, I forget her name. Um, like the lady that got shot damn near point blank.
Oh, and
And
the congresswoman from like Arizona.
yeah, yeah. But it's like, that one, she got shot at point blank range
Like in
in
the
the head
head,
and
Gabby
didn't die.
Giffords.
Gabby Giffords, yeah.
Yeah, she like in the head and
Um,
didn't die.
yeah. So it's like every assassination attempt, even where somebody rolls up on somebody at point blank range and shoots them, isn't successful. I think one of the more successful ones that was public in the public consciousness was when that dude, I don't know the fucking name, he like rolled up on the like America's Most Wanted like criminal and like offed him. I think they got it on camera, but I don't think they aired it on TV. I think that they ended up like having the wherewithal not to air it because it
Yeah.
was, you know, at the time that would have been way beyond what was socially acceptable. Whereas now, I mean, you might see it on TMZ or some shit, but I doubt they would even air it on like
No, that's the kind of
primetime
thing I think that's
television.
still the kind of thing that would end up being published on YouTube with some like
Yeah,
freshly minted
exactly.
account that has no video posting history, no commenting history, no any history. There, it's a fresh Chrome account or a fresh Google account,
Well, because
and then it gets disseminated from there.
there was an assassination recently. I forget what country it was, where it was like I think it was like a candidate that got like one of the opposition party just like walked up and shot him in the head. And for a while, that video was going around on Twitter, but I don't think any like news source actually showed it because I would have to avoid it where I'm like I don't want to fucking see that,
Wait,
no.
was this in
I
Ecuador or something?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
But it wasn't. I don't think it was like a sitting official, but it was like somebody. I don't remember the exact details. But regardless, the video was going around where I'm like, that's just so unnecessary on so many levels. Where I don't know what anybody gets out of sharing that video or why they think somebody needs to see it.
The
Like,
six of the Ecuadorian suspects in the presidential candidate's assassination were killed in
uh,
prison like last week,
damn,
like a week ago. They
wow.
were just murked in prison.
Mm, I figured it would be something like that happened.
Wow. All
But
dead.
I think it's like okay, American news is weird in that there's really no reason I need to know about that for any reason, let alone have it be some footnote in the back of facts in my head that I loosely know for whatever reason because I saw it somewhere. But that's the constant state of like an American, and it's a lot of useless and irrelevant facts to our lives, but they're made to seem as if it's like somehow extremely relevant to us, and that's probably because of some propagandistic reason. Because that's where I'm like, oh, the assassination in Ecuador is probably setting up some fucking campaign into Ecuador that's going to happen in February or March of next year. That we're just being primed to just go along with by being
Oil,
fed
shrimp,
diesel.
bananas, coffee, cut flowers, cocoa, and Panama hats. That's what Ecuador is known for.
Well, I think you touched on another issue is like, do they have something that our military would go in there for?
Yeah, fucking Panama hats, obviously. And crude oil and shrimp
Yeah, and it's like,
and
oh,
coffee and bananas. Holy crap, they've actually got a lot of things that Americans want.
I mean, oil. You
Yeah.
had us at oil.
Yeah, that's number one. Crude oil and derivatives, then shrimp, then bananas, then coffee. You know, it's almost in an order of importance too, which is kind of fucked up.
But
Principal destinations: China, United States, Peru, Chile, and Panama.
it,
Yeah, fuck, I don't. I'm
it's like frustrating to see Americans get primed and goaded into war by propaganda and media campaigns just so over and over. And I think the big one with the most recent war is the Armageddon Christians. And I think that's why, like, I'm not for literacy tests, but there's shit where I'm like, oh, if you believe that a war is going to start Armageddon and that it's going to be the end of days and Jesus is going to return, I don't think that person should be able to vote. Just just really like there's certain things where I'm like I don't think that person should be able to have a gun. I don't think they should be able to vote. I don't think they should like do a lot of things. Like they should be not isolated from the benefits of society, but that person should not be in a position to be like influencing our lives in a way where they end up overriding our capacity to exist in our own uh, autonomous way. In that, like, those are the people that are now preventing women from getting abortions. Like, those are the people that are rolling back LGBTQ plus rights. It's those people and giving people who believe in fucking Israel war induced Armageddon the right to vote is like getting a lot of us in positions where we don't need to be. Cause that's where I was like looking at the population of Israel and Palestine, and I'm like, both of those places are like less than half of fucking uh California put together, basically. So it's not to this is not to quantify people's lives or anything like that. This is it if California got into an internal dispute, would the entire world be at risk because of California? And I'm like, fuck no, of course not. That sounds fucking stupid. That sounds fucking absurd. So the idea that like right now the entire world is
you
like
could
at
fit the
risk
entire
of
population of Israel and Palestine in Illinois. It's like there's more
oh
people in
easy,
Illinois.
easy,
Um,
easy, easy. Let's not get into the fact that the land that they're fighting over is like shitty on both sides.
it's
So
like
it's
the best
like
part of the whole Middle East, though.
uh, uh, that's like being the fucking best kickboxer in Brussels, like or in Belgium. Like, okay, okay, I guess that's not wrong, but I still, uh, again, I'm not gonna get into the fact that like they'd all be better off somewhere else. So the fact that they're like fighting over this like land that is only it's not only valuable because of the religious implications. That's not it. It's only in conflict because both sides were placed in a position to be in conflict with each other in the last 75 years, I think. Or wait,
Yeah, 48.
yeah. So Oh, I guess it's like
85
a little
years?
longer. 85 now. Yeah, fuck, we're getting old.
Damn.
Um, uh, the fact again is
Oh
not
yeah, the
about.
entire region was set up to sustain perpetual conflict because
Yes.
there's only so much water resource available to that portion of the world, and all of the water resources are being essentially tied up along boundaries, which makes it really difficult to get water to certain places if somebody decides, hey, we're going to divert a bunch of this water that's in our land. It's a really poorly mapped out place.
Well, what I was getting at is at the same time, America's not in a good place on the issue of race. Like they still have fucking Jim Crow happening. Black people are still, I don't even want to call us second class citizens then because they're third class citizens if there's levels. And that's where, when you don't have any citizenship as like um what would be the slave or uh untouchable class, because we were at one point untouchable class if people weren't slaves, and that's not, they don't have citizenship in most cases unless they own land and were able to read, which is very difficult, and there's a very small sliver of people who qualified. It's like 3,000 people in the entire like country that were that you know demographic and black. So it's not like that definitely existed, but they weren't at the time the main population. And even when they existed, it's like they're not still not first class citizens. So that's where I'm like the highest you could really get is third, maybe second class citizenship as a black person at the time if you were free. And we're still second class citizens, even in like, yeah, you got like Oprah and The Rock or Rihanna or you have black people like Jay-Z and Beyonce who can attain first class citizenships, but somewhere they're still niggers. And that's the issue with being black. It doesn't matter how much money you have.
Michael
That
Jackson.
issue, huh?
They killed Michael Jackson.
Exactly. You fucking Dick Cheney was nowhere near as rich as Michael Jackson, but that motherfucker has beaten death I don't know how many times because he can get a fucking fake heart installed in a way where, like, if Michael Jackson tried to get that shit, it would be where they went in and fucking did some shit and killed him because that's what fucking happens. So that's what I'm like, you see the difference in a black wealthy person and a white wealthy person in where the blackness does not get overcome by money. And that's why we're still not first class citizens. Not to say that we should want to be first class citizens in the American caste system, but those people are used by racists to assert that black people are first class citizens, which is just demonstrably false. And that's why I get frustrated when black people are like thrust into, like, we're still an oppressed minority. So when we're put into a position where we're like made to seem as if just even remotely identifying with the Palestinian struggle is somehow meant to be like opposition to the Israeli people, that's fucking, it's infuriating. And I can't stress enough that, like, as a black person, of course I would empathize with like every Israeli person that's like ever been under duress. Like that's fucking stupid to make it seem like because I could possibly identify with victims of apartheid that somehow that means I'm disregarding the other side as if the other side doesn't suffer in some ways. That's like acting as if American Appalachians aren't poor because white supremacy and white fucking systematic racism exists doesn't end up hurting some white people in the process. Like, of course, those things can be simultaneous, but the problem is like all these fucking unnuanced bad takes that have been dominating for like the past week where I'm just like, it makes me feel insane that people will come out and be like, oh, I stand with Israel and all the atrocities with Hamas that they've committed and all this stuff is fucking horrible. And just in there, and it's like, well, and like, my thing is the side disparity isn't that big in the size of population. It's the fact that Palestine doesn't really have a state. Therefore, there's no fucking Palestinian military, which is why they always talk about Hamas. And this is in terms of when they're framing this as like Israel versus Hamas, that's why they're dehumanizing every Palestinian as if they're part of Hamas. Because if you would then identify that you're attacking a people with no fucking army, that's obviously wrong. That's obviously wrong. Yeah. So like, this is also why everybody shut the fuck up about Ukraine, because it's ideologically inconsistent to support Ukraine and Israel. You can't be the ones supporting capacity to fight against an oppressive regime trying to take your territory on the one hand and then support Israel on the other hand, because it's ideologically inconsistent. That's why all these fucking centrist Democrats have stopped talking about Ukraine just unanimously. And I don't know if they'll ever talk about it, but they're going to keep funding it, and they're going to keep funding Israel, and they're going to keep making it seem like you can have those fucking positions and somehow sleep at night as if that's not the most hypocritical fucking stance to ever take. And there's been other hypocritical shit, but as far as stuff that's happening in modern times, supporting Ukraine and Israel is like, oh, we're just selectively genocidal. That's all. It's like, oh, we've decided as a government that Russian people aren't human, which is fucked up because this whole thing takes a lot of dehumanization of Russian people to support the Ukrainian campaign and the way that the American government has been. In the process of what's happening in Israel, anybody who's Palestinian is suddenly part of Hamas, which is now being, they'll put fucking ISIS in parentheses as if it's the fucking same thing, which is like, to see people who would claim to be democratic doing that shit is like, I would expect it out of Republicans, and I am not even really surprised out of Democrats. I'm just disappointed.
Man, I saw something where someone was like trying to liken Hamas to Nazis, and it's like, man, I'm not sure if Hamas rises to the level of fascism that the Nazis perpetrated yet.
It's a horrible comparison for very many reasons. Yeah, it's a terrible comparison for a lot of reasons.
And
it's intellectually lazy at the least. It's intentionally conflating all resistance to Israeli apartheid as anti-Semitism, which is the worst faith thing that people have been doing lately. And that's one of the issues where I can't stress enough that the Israeli people are obviously not the government. So like, conflating the two is fucking stupid, but using that conflation as a shield to prevent people from saying anything about the Israeli government is like, that's dirty, man. That's really a dirty tactic that has been employed specifically by celebrities, which is where I'm like,
well, I think this is like the kind of thing that's the result of a lack of historical reflection. Like,
no, I think it's intentionally misrepresentative. Like, I think they're intentionally trying to make they're using Israeli citizens as a human shield against the Israeli government. And it's a dirty fucking tactic. I don't think they care about historical context. I just think they don't want anybody to attack the Israeli government, because you'll never see those people talk about the way the Israeli government treats Jews who speak out for Palestine.
Yeah.
They don't give a fuck how the Israeli government treats those people because they're fucking the Jews that speak up on Palestine. They are fucking those people up. And some of them are in the Gaza Strip and some of them are in Palestine. And the Israeli government is fucking those people up. And you never, ever, ever see the person who's using Jewish people as a human shield for the Israeli government speaking up about those Jews, which is why I maybe maybe they'll give in like doing this out of lack of historical context, but I'm not going to give them that benefit of the doubt because it's too easy to get just a fucking second and learn the historical context. It just takes a goddamn second, really. That's where adults, I tend not to give them benefit of the doubt on certain things about like learning history, because like you'll see people be like, oh, black people don't know what it's like to be bombed by a government in America. The fuck we don't. Are you serious? You need to learn some American history when people say that shit, because it hasn't even stopped really. Like it didn't even stop in modern times. That shit happened up until like the most famous one is the move bombing, but there's like situations where
the one in Philadelphia.
Yeah, there's situations where like children will be mutilated or even killed from like flashbangs. That's bombing, nigga. That's fucking bombing, nigga. The government is bombing us. So that's why black people don't fuck with the American government. That's why black people ain't about to fuck with no apartheid government ever. So when people are like, you need to come out, and black people who don't recognize that we were supporting Black Lives Matter need to recognize you need to support Israel. Nah, nigga, you need to fucking save that shit for somebody who isn't an oppressed minority, first off. And then don't act like not supporting apartheid is the same as being against the Israeli people, because it's absolutely fucking not. And that shit is pissing me off as a black person, that I'm here as a stolen person who's not a fucking settler. No, I'm not a colonizer. I'm still a stolen person. I'm an indigenous person because I'm also part native. But in that, as a black person who was stolen from somewhere else, as an indigenous person, a misplaced indigenous person, to then act like I'm the same as a settler. No, they can fuck out of here, all the way out of here with that shit. And the issue becomes when people try to make it seem as if black people are complicit in paying the Israeli government to be an apartheid state. Motherfucker, I shouldn't be paying taxes. I shouldn't, like, the way that black labor has been stolen and we still gotta fucking pay taxes, nigga? No, don't act like I'm the same. We're hostages here. We're fucking, it's not, we're not first class citizens. So when people try to then come and blame second class ass citizens for what the state is doing, they're doing the same exact shit that people who conflate the state of Israel with the government are doing. That's wrong. You shouldn't do that. That's why I went through the painstaking process of saying why I shouldn't be blamed for the American government's fucking bullshit, because the Israeli people shouldn't be blamed for that Israeli government's bullshit either. It's just that people can't get to that fucking point because they're too busy trying to virtue signal that they support Israel unconditionally, which is fucking stupid. You should never ever support anything unconditionally as a government. Nah, that's why black people were fucking oppressed ever, because people supported the government unconditionally and were allowed Jim Crow and allowed fucking slavery. So no, first, you shouldn't do that. And then when it comes to actual war being declared on people that don't have a fucking military, nigga, that's genocide. So if people are not willing to acknowledge that the Israeli government is trying to commit genocide and the United States government is giving them the fucking weapons to do it, well, nigga, you just support state-sponsored genocide. That's all. Just
Man.
say it. Just say it with your whole chest. Not you, obviously,
Yeah.
but
So,
all the
so
people.
how long do you think China can continue to support Iran and Palestine and Russia? Because China's economy looks to be in free fall at the
and
moment,
and Israel. Let's not forget they sell weapons to
and
Israel
it is
too.
real.
Because this is how you know
Because the
it's
Belt and
fucking
Road
all
Initiative
bullshit.
that
Because
runs right through all
if
that.
America and China are both selling weapons to Israel, but we're supposed to be fucking enemies, what is all this bullshit? It's all just like war profiteers yet again using propaganda to profit off of international conflict and intra-national conflict, and then make it seem like that's not what's happening. Because this is why, to me, I don't understand how weapons manufacturers can still, like, I mean, obviously they're manipulating our government, but like that shit should be just banned. Like, we don't need any more weapons. Why is the UN allowing anybody to just build more weapons at scale like that? Like, we could survive off of all the weapons from fucking World War I and World War II that are just still sitting around. And that's where to keep
That's kind of what
to have.
Russia's doing right now.
I mean, yeah, but the only reason we're not doing that is because all of those weapons effectively are sitting in homes as if those are waiting to be conscripted into the national defense force, when in reality those motherfuckers aren't ever going to leave their homes unless it's to go to like the local town square and protest against the other people in their neighborhoods because they're too fucking lazy to actually do anything beyond that. So the idea that there's a nation with more guns than people that's always ready to go to war, but most of them aren't actually willing to go to war. This is war profiteers manipulating everybody. And from my perspective, because I don't blame people for succumbing to media when the media is doing their best to manipulate them, because it's really difficult to resist that, actually. So like, I'm not blaming people for having like bloodlust and like actually loving the transition from violence to sex, because the media has beaten that into their heads that, oh, you just got into a car chase, you just got into a gunfight, now you fuck, now you make out. Like, that conditioning, when you got your entire life of seeing that, like, oh, this guy just got into a fight and beat up the bully, and now he's gonna go make out with the girl. Yeah, that shit starts to fuck with people's heads after generations of that type of framing. So like, I can't even blame people for the bloodlust, but the companies, that shit shouldn't even be legal. So I mean, I feel like an idiot saying that because it is not gonna ever like go away in reality. But I that's I struggle to see when people engage with media and then don't get it. Like, Rambo is not a pro war movie series, but that's like the exact opposite result that Americans come out with. Or like, the cyberpunk theme is not about being cool because you got like implants and like corporations have
No.
taken over. That's not supposed to be cool, but that's the exact like message that Americans have gotten from it. Not just Americans, but
Oh man.
others too. But
Like it's funny that you mentioned cyberpunk. I was just looking at images of, China last night because it's a really weird place. There's a lot of giant buildings that have no electricity in some places. And then there are places like Shanghai where it looks like the future, and Hong Kong, parts of it look like the future, but then, just a few miles off in the distance, it's barely illuminated. And these are, China's like the most expansive surveillance state that's ever existed at this point. Got cameras everywhere. They've got entire, divisions of their intelligence agencies that are just dedicated to watching their own population. I still don't fully understand their social credit system, except I understand that if one's credit drops below a certain point, they might not be able to get on an airplane or a train. So, bye bye opportunity to travel to do anything like work. Um, and to me, it's like the worst parts of cyberpunk are fully realized in that place, and it's kind of funny because all of cyberpunk is supposed to be cautionary. It's like, yeah, we really don't want this. We're not supposed to want this. This is all like pretty bad. Like all of Ghost in the Shell is like a warning of like, this is, if this happens, this is the kind of stuff people are going to be dealing with. People aren't going to be treated like humans anymore. They're going to be numbers in a file. And I think you're right. I think that that people got the audience saw the fashion and said, "Oh yeah, that looks cool. I want to look like Neo." But Neo has like no hair, and he has a bunch of weird, scars from implants and a freaking jack in the back of his head, so they can plug him into a computer. That's what Neo actually looks like. Like everything that looks cool in Cyberpunk is actually just like a poison tree frog. It's bright so that you know that it's dangerous.
Well, but also like people just are they have blinders on because when you look at the Cyberpunk video game as an example, it's not great. Like the city that you're in, there's if you just look at the lights and the neon, it looks cool, and the cars, it looks cool, but then you look around and there's like cyber psychosis everywhere. Fucking people are on drugs everywhere. There's constantly like literally everywhere you look, there's people fucked up and like having cyber psychosis episodes, and then you'll see like a little kid walking around right next to that, and you're like, oh my god, this is fucking absolutely horrible. Even in the place that looks it only looks cool if you don't look at it, and that's
Yeah.
why I feel like these people are still missing the point because cyberpunk 2077 isn't leaving out those things. If anything, it's like it's everything is there, but it's giving you the opportunity to continue to ignore it if you want to, and go be a fucking corpo if you want to, and like just focus on making money and like just giving a fuck about yourself and not realizing that the entire city is falling apart around you, even though you're still on this goddamn mission to like become, a legend or whatever the fuck, whatever those selfish people, however they play it.
Yeah.
Is if you play it that way, you're gonna miss it. You're gonna not see that stuff. But like I said, it's all there, and that's why I think it's definitely not glorifying any of that stuff. It's only glorified if people look just ignore all the bad parts. And I think that's like perpetually the problem. Like, yeah, when Rambo's fucking shooting off the M60 or whatever, it's like, yeah, that shit looks cool in that moment, but everything around it is horrible. It's terrible. It's meant to be to get to the point when he has to do that. It's because all of these things have driven him to this level of dehumanizing because everything else has done that around him, and he doesn't want to be that person. So I think like if a person can't watch Rambo and get that out of it, they shouldn't be watching Rambo, which is where a lot of I think people I think this is where you were saying they don't have the historical context. Uh, like I feel like we're on the same issue, but it's not necessarily the same person.
Yeah.
Like the person who doesn't have the historical context or the one that like gets to that framing
It's the person who found the door into the next room by mistake. and just went
Yeah,
in.
and I feel like they're more likely to have an unnuanced take that's not necessarily going to just side with Israel anyway. And it's because that person is like, they're gonna be like, well, can't we all just get along type person? And they're gonna like not gonna understand why Israel and Palestine can't just get along. So their take is gonna come off sounding like, yeah, they have no fucking idea, but it's not just gonna be like, oh, I side with Israel unconditionally, and that's where I think like that's that's the take where when some people were like all lives matter, I don't think that they were trying to be racist. I think those were the people who didn't have the historical context.
I think that there are a lot of people
And I think
who, for them, this is the first time, and this is it's all new to them. And this is the
and
first real experience they've had with Israel, Palestine, Middle East conflict,
yes.
and so they don't understand that. Some of us have been watching this our entire lives, and we don't know a world without Palestinian, Middle East, Israel conflict. And then there are people who are older than us who, you know, they might have been around before all that stuff started going crazy, but probably not. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if
There's a
that was.
huge difference between ignorant naivete and intentional
Yeah.
misrepresentation that's malicious. Because I think that's where there's when some people are like all lives matter, I'm gonna hear them out to see why they're saying that and decide after they've given their reason why they said that. And everybody who says all lives matter isn't coming from a racist place. A lot of them just aren't informed about history enough. They don't understand class in America because caste and class are often conflated because you can still be like an upper class person but not be up like the highest caste. And that's really really difficult for Americans to grasp because like I said, those two things are conflated, but it's also made to seem as if we don't have caste here to make it seem foreign, as if like as if they don't love cosplaying the Victorian caste system while also making it seem like British people don't have caste systems and it's only Indian people. Because the Indian context is really the only context you'll hear it discussed in America, even though obviously that's not the only one that exists globally. Um, but it's also to exoticize it to make it seem like it doesn't happen here, which the upper castes and upper class use to make lower class and lower caste people seem like they're the same. And it's with white poor people, they they vote with the upper caste and the upper class because that because that stuff in America is so rooted in whiteness, it's very easy to make it seem like to a poor white person that they're closer to Bill Gates or to Steve Jobs than Oprah because of their whiteness. And what that's the trick to them where on the one hand, like, yeah, being a billionaire isn't going to remove Oprah or Tyler Perry. I don't know if Tyler Perry's a billionaire, but whoever, if you're a black billionaire, that still doesn't remove you from situations where your blackness overrides it. But that person's way closer to the upper class than the average poor white person. But making that poor white person think that they're not is part of the trick. And Dick Gregory was one of the first people to really illustrate this in a way that made it easy to understand. And it's like, I think when poor white people hear stuff about systematic um, racism or systematic oppression, they've become so inundated with the propaganda that they think that they're part of that system when they're being oppressed by it too. If obviously they were willing to accept in many cases, like, yeah, you're never going to be as rich as Bill Gates, or you're never going to be as rich as Oprah because they're part of some club that you're not part of, and it has nothing to do with your whiteness. The white dream of being included overrides that reality, and that's the thing that the upper class and the upper caste have really been good about intriguing um, the poor white people. But the problem becomes you got a lot of upper caste and upper class people in the Democratic Party who don't actually want the upper caste and upper class to redistribute their wealth, but they've been good at cosplaying it. So that's where you get these fucking Nancy Pelosi's and Joe Biden's and like, basically all the people in Congress, um, except for AOC, and only because she's like not 100% polluted by that shit yet. She's probably going to end up being one of those people eventually, but she's not yet. Um, but again, most of the people who are identifying as Democrat, at least middle upper class and upper caste, not everyone obviously, but it's generally, I think, why a lot of our social programs have been rolled back is because our Democratic Party has been infiltrated by these upper caste people. Okay, let me rephrase that. I don't know if we ever had a real working class party. I don't think that ever necessarily existed in America.
I think that there may have been working class candidates who rose to levels of authority within Congress and maybe even the White House.
That's true, but
I don't think that it's been like an entity or a group large enough to distinguish themselves as like. I mean, what is the working class party?
Not in government, but it's been unions.
Yeah, I was going to say union.
And that's where, we wouldn't have OSHA without unions. Like, we wouldn't have child labor laws without unions. We wouldn't have fucking building occupancy codes without unions. And lot of this shit that
all
our
the roads
government takes
roads.
credit for. Oh, God, yeah. The shit that the government takes credit for, in a lot of cases, actually union representation getting the government to do those things, because too many people in government don't know what it's like to be blue collar. And I think that's where we do have a feudal problem with, like, AOC is one of the only blue collar people in government right now, which is fucked up. Like, it shouldn't be that. We shouldn't have that many representatives and that few blue collar experience, mainly because blue collar and education shouldn't be separated. Like, the idea that somebody either goes into academia or goes into blue collar labor, that's fucking stupid too. But what I also think hasn't been acknowledged is a lot of people who work or go to college have had to work. And so, like, I definitely had blue collar years, but because I was in college, the college overrides any element of me working in a warehouse or me working at a fucking coffee shop or whatever. And it makes it seem like, oh, I'm an academic, but like, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 or whatever the fuck it was, and like went to work at 5 and then worked for like 8 hours at a time. And like, yeah, I did that shit too. So the idea that because I went to college, somehow that undermines my capacity to understand blue collar labor and the mindset, that's fucking stupid. But if somebody went to college and never did that, then they'll never understand that. So there's an element of people who are legislating about work who've never had to do that kind of work being a problem. But then on the other hand, people who get educated have their work histories overridden by their education, and then working class people don't want to listen to them either. Not to say that those people don't get out of touch, but I think this is where you get a lot of the QAnon shit, where people extend their anti-intellectualism way too far, and then now they're suddenly not listening to doctors and they're like, "Oh, I heard Joe Rogan knows this fucking cure for this thing, but my doctor that I used to go to for 20 years, fuck that guy. He just wanted to get me hopped up on prescription pills, and maybe he's right, but the idea that because the prescription pill industry or pharmaceutical industry has infiltrated medicine should undermine all doctors is like anti-intellectualism creeping into American existence in another way, and that's where
I think everyone's gone to a horrible mechanic that tried to rip them off at least once, but that doesn't
oh
mean
yeah,
that like everyone stops taking their vehicle to a mechanic and just buys a new
exactly.
car every time something breaks. Actually, it kind
And
of seems
suddenly
like
you
that,
use
but
YouTube for everything. Fix it yourself. Some people do, and they end up fucking up their cars.
yeah.
But the general public, I think, they'll just go to a different mechanic. So I think it's
they,
well,
they
but
find the
Americans
video.
treat
It's
their
like you can do this with just a Leatherman and a screwdriver, and then
yeah, that's that's true. But Americans treat their cars better than they treat their bodies, so
yeah.
that's why I think they're not
Oh no,
generally gonna do that.
no, people just go
Whereas,
find a better mechanic who won't rip them off. Because there's
yeah,
so many cars out there that mechanics don't even need to rip people off. They can just do the job and they'll make plenty of money. Because people drive like idiots and they wreck their cars or they break something and they need it fixed. And that's part of the deal. Maintenance. Things wear out. Got to get it fixed. Because
but
who?
Americans don't understand maintenance.
But how
They
many
they
people?
never have.
God, these so man, that makes me wonder. Are these people just buying whole ass cars every time something's small and like?
Yes, damn near. Yes. That's
Oh
that's
man,
why the lease is so popular. Otherwise, the lease wouldn't be a real thing. Like, um, mainly or it wouldn't be that it's not a thing. The way people use them, they just switch their car out every couple of years,
yeah,
basically, and get a new lease on the trade in and trade up their car payment, and they never really own a car, so they don't really maintain it and they don't really fucking check it. And yeah, it's why some people, not some, a lot of people's car payments are, they sound like rent payments, but this is an issue of people wanting to have that car but also not wanting to know when to fucking check your oil or when to put more oil in or when
man.
to like put more air in the tires or check your air in the tires or like little shit like that, let alone when things actually go wrong to fix them. So when you got a system that lets you just trade it out, yeah, you're not gonna have, you know, what I'm realizing after 40 years is incentive is everything. And if things aren't incentivized correctly, then people aren't gonna do them. And that's where um if there's no real incentive to learn how a car works, people aren't going to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
There's really no incentive, especially like the cheaper maintenance, actual maintenance gets, then yeah, people you're going to have going and like paying them to fill up their tires and shit. And they're not even going to fill up their own tires because it just, couple bucks, whatever.
oh, it's just a service that they do, right? No one even thinks about it. They just
And they'll check your fluids while they do it. And so the easier it is for people to just do that, the less likely people are to check their own fluids and check their own tire pressure. And so the the paradox of convenience and the paradox of choice are real, um in that when people get the option to be lazy, yeah, they're gonna do it in many cases, but that's why I am of the mind that those choices have to be incentivized as to make it so that people are going to choose the more long-term altruistic choice Because otherwise, if you don't incentivize them to, they're just going to make the selfish choice, which is how we end up with climate change. It's like a bunch of people not being incentivized to act in the collective's interests are going to act in their own best interests, which includes like buying a polluting car if they're given the option. Like if it's cheaper to buy a car that pollutes than to buy a car that is green at all aspects, whether it's not using child labor to get the fucking cobalt or the nickel or whatever versus using electricity instead of gas, and the electricity is coming from non-slave labor produced solar panels. If that's the only option that people have, whether it's through subsidy or whatever, or if they can't afford anything else and they have to take the bus that uses those things, that's better than a bunch of people being able to drive cheap cars and collectively killing off our species in a way where none of us are going to be able to fucking do that shit because we're all dead in like 100 years. And that's why, to me, it's
Man,
like
100 years is optimistic.
Yeah, it is optimistic. I was trying to be optimistic about it.
That's like twice. That's like twice the amount of time that's projected for like habitability, like for the southern United States. In 100 years, if there are still people living in Indiana, like beachfront property.
But this only really happened since the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, that's
like,
why it's so fucked up.
Yeah, only since we've been able to pollute at scale have we put ourselves collectively at risk. I mean, obviously the nuclear weapons is one thing,
yeah, but
when we're talking about just choking ourselves out.
Man, it only took humans 200 years of industrialization to effectively put out as much carbon as something like 800,000 years of heavy global volcanic activity. That's so fucked up. I mean, it's incredibly fucked up. 200 years versus 800,000 plus years of volcanic activity.
But that was also 200 of the most unethical, least concerned for the greater good years of our species.
Oh, yeah.
Just in general. And without acknowledging that part, I think it'd be easy to get wrapped up in industrialization as this like thing that's beneficial. But only, I think, really the decolonize ideology has really framed industrialism as negative. So they're not getting taken seriously outside of the decolonialist movement, which is a problem. So not being able to see any real downsides of industrialization is why I think it's going to continue to get like run out of control. But the worst part about it is industrialization is why individualization went away. Whereas now we're being sold individualism at scale and not actually getting individualism because the clothes aren't being made locally and the shoes aren't being made locally. So there's no actual individualist flair or style because industrialization is the only way things work at scale. Obviously, there's here and there's examples of like successful local shops that are able to like produce clothes and not be killed off by the prices that they're not able to match. But in general, we only had local individualized economies before industrialization. That's all that was possible.
And those shops dream of being picked up by a larger brand.
Now, yeah.
Because it's just like the music industry or any industry, any small independent shop, like ultimately their best bet is to do something so well that a bigger company absorbs them. Whether or not they get to keep their job or not, that's up to like negotiations during the process of during the acquisition process. But even then, that's like that's when somebody's made it, because then their product becomes part of the industrial economy. Then it's being made in mass at a warehouse in China, probably, but who knows where. That's like essentially what happened with a pet rock.
Yeah, but when it's like chicken, then
Ugh.
that's how you end up with
Crazy avian flus.
yes, exactly, because the farms now are, oh my God, we drove by a hog farm and it smelled
Oh, it's
like
horrible.
death. Oh,
There,
just so much,
it's hard to.
but for miles.
Yeah, and if the air is stagnant, it's just like and it
Oh
lingers,
God, yeah,
clings
yeah.
on to anything that goes through it. You can't. That smell. There's like,
And
ugh.
and when you see the hog farms that like they don't have windows and it's just like ventilation and a bunch of things that look like the places where windows would be, and you're like, oh my God, it has to be the most nightmarish, fucking inhumane, heart sucking, soul sucking conditions inside of that place if it stinks like this miles away after we've driven past it. And that's where I'm like, only that's only necessary because of industrialized food or industrialized meal service, because it's like people aren't really even going for the food, they're going for the service. And at that in that case, now we're turning those like McDonald's places into the equivalent of those um, farms, but it's just with humans behind the counter, which is why Americans don't think of McDonald's workers as human beings and they treat them that way. But they also don't want them to be turned into robots, because then that would remove the feeling of being better than the cast, the lowest caste that's still visible. Because once you're the homeless, now you're invisible and they don't even see you anymore.
Or
They need
they
to
create
see,
laws to prevent you from finding any place that seems like you might be able to collect one's thoughts.
but they only do that because those people are invisible. They've hit invisible and untouchable status.
Yeah.
Because that's the like common theme I'm seeing, where the people who like fantasize about cyberpunk just ignore all the shit that's happening on the streets. And they're the same people that go to New York City or fucking San Francisco and they're like, isn't this awesome? Because they're like not seeing all the bad stuff happening around on the actual street, and just looking at the buildings and looking at the shops and looking at the upper caste stuff that's available to them, that's not available to those other people for various reasons. So yeah, it's like I feel like that's the same demographic. Um, and it's frustrating that they always get the wrong message. Like, and we have to coexist with them. And yeah, I think that's the I feel like it's easier for us to coexist with people than it is for them, which is why they're the ones that end up trying to like get anti-homeless architecture and shit, where you got the bumps on the park benches and shit so they can't sleep there at night, or whatever, instead of investing in actual shelters or ways to get homeless people off the streets. They invest in anti-homeless architecture, because that's one of, oh dude, they have that shit in the cyberpunk game. Like,
this is
I don't
like,
know if you've seen it, but they totally have anti-homeless architecture in Cyberpunk. They're making a point. Like, you'll go if you're walking just like down the stairs or something. It's called hostile architecture.
mm,
Um, but they have it in Chicago. Yeah, they have it in Chicago, and it's like you'll see these like steel knobs on benches just in the places where if people were laying on them, it would like go into that person so they wouldn't be able to lay there. The shit that they have in Chicago, they have that shit in the Cyberpunk game. You just have to fucking look for it. But it's everywhere. It's in every bench you go to, they're gonna have that hostile architecture.
oh yeah, I'm looking at pictures of hostile architecture.
But I doubt you'll see any YouTube videos about the hostile architecture in Cyberpunk because nobody's making those connections
Oh, I'm
because they're
looking at
so
hostile
focused on the
architecture in real
games.
life.
Right, but I'm talking about the fact that it exists in the game
Yeah.
is like they're making a statement, but everybody's missing that statement because they're so focused on the technology that they're like, "Oh shit, we're like becoming the thing that enables this hostile architecture to persist." But they don't care because the tech is so cool.
It's necessary to help maintain order, make public space safer, and to stop people from using public space in ways that are unwanted.
But it's like this if
That sounds
somebody's
like,
making a satirical so this is where okay, um Starship Troopers becoming a recruitment movie is what happens when people don't have media literacy. It's like
yeah.
clearly that movie was anti-war. Clearly it was like making fun of propaganda. But when people encountered it and were like, "Oh, I want to go fight in Iraq," you're like, "Wait, what? Hold up. Were we watching the same movie?"
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of people that saw that shit and went and signed up, and you're like, "Hold on."
They must have missed the
You
part
just
that
like
like only 3 characters in the entire movie lived to the end of the movie. Like, are you sorry, 4? There were 4 characters in the entire movie that lived through the entire movie.
yeah. Because then they'll do okay. So like the reason I'm using the Cyberpunk game is I think that the way they're presenting it is it's obviously exploiting those people and the way they do it is giving you multiple endings. So if you're like a terrible person, you're not going to get a good ending to the game.
Yeah.
And there's various levels of like good endings, including like, oh, you'll be rich, but everybody around you died and shit like that. Whereas sometimes you'll make it to the end of the game and you're not particularly wealthy. You don't own a bunch of properties or anything like that, but all of the sub characters managed to survive to the end of the game, and they didn't die through your exploits or whatever it is. Because it's not to say that people dying is always the crux of it, but there's a lot of situations in that game where the things that you do can be in the interest of everybody or your person or an individual, and it gives you those choices. And I think a lot of times selfish people gravitate towards those types of games anyway, so they're going to be choosing the most selfish stuff, but the developers are going to punish you for it. And I think the developers in the game punish those people because they don't really get punished in real life enough, which is why they end up going to the game and doing horrible shit. And they still don't learn their lesson. So, on the one hand, I think it's funny that those people just don't learn, but also that in an environment where you're given the option to be altruistic or be self-interested and self-invested just 1,000%, those situations seem to invite people who are self-interested, and it's almost like it becomes a sandbox for them to be authoritarian, because they're gonna seek out authority and seek out the capacity to like influence somebody's life in a negative way. And I didn't I didn't think about those games like that until I think it's like Fallout New Vegas. You can like start freeing slaves, where I'm like, why would anybody not do that? But of course there's going to be people out there who then, it also gives you the option to start participating in the slave trade, where I'm like, it's fucked up that a game would give you that option, but when you have multiple thousands years of humans proving that that's what they're going to do if given the chance, then that's only natural in a situation like Fallout. But it also can't be watered down, because then if you choose to become a slaver, people don't like you and they start gunning after you and shit like that. So it's not without consequence. It's not like you can just go become a slaver and make a bunch of money and then still get the good ending. Like that, they don't give you those options when they're going to give you the option to do bad things, which is, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
In game design. But when there's teenagers who are illiterate, who have media illiteracy problems, getting these games because they also have parents who have media illiteracy problems, that's how we end up with like a lot of the problems that we have. And that's where I think, if parents were more present, we wouldn't have that problem in the first place. But that's why, to me, I'm not really against shit like the ESRB. At first, I thought it was not a good thing, but seeing how parents were just buying their kids GTA to get around the ESRB ratings, I'm like, oh, we need better rating programs and shit, better restrictions on access to prove that somebody like is gonna go buy this game. They're not just gonna go give it to a kid, because in some cases, I think an adult buying Grand Theft Auto for a kid could be worse than an adult buying alcohol for a kid. Not just it's like obviously many different scenarios, but Grand Theft Auto could ruin a child's capacity to see human beings as actual living things and not.
Grand Theft Auto is a crime simulator. It's a criminal activity simulator.
If you want it, yeah,
it
for
is.
the most part.
You don't have to make it that thing. I know people who just engage in like they'll buy a car and then they'll just drive it around and do like the stunts, stuff like that. And then I know people who just run cheats so they can like parachute out of things. There's nothing wrong with that.
You don't have to kill anybody.
You don't have to kill anybody. You can just, enter cheat codes and buy stuff and never have to break. Well, you don't have to not break laws. I mean, that's kind of the point of the game on some level.
You can get a job. Yeah,
you can get a job. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff. But it's also primarily like the vast majority of the jobs are, underworld type shit.
Hell, I think you can become a cop if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure you can go do police missions if you just wanted to just only do that. Or yeah, because you don't have to be a cop. You can drive an ambulance. I don't know if you can drive a fire truck or not as a fireman.
How to become a cop in GTA 5 story mode. Okay.
Well, I was thinking even 3, because even as far back as 3.
Yeah, but I don't have GTA 3.
Oh, definitely 5. I know in 5 you can definitely do shit like drive the ambulance, just like go on missions and shit as an ambulance driver. But it's like that mechanic. Then yeah, you don't have to play the game as a sociopathic murderer and somebody who's constantly doing crimes, even though the name of the game is literally a crime. Um, you don't have to do that because then I don't know. Did you ever play the Just Cause series?
No, no, I had not.
There was like a point where I was playing that game and I was having the most fun not using guns, and it because it gives you the option to do things and not actually have to use guns to incapacitate people. I was that was like some of the most fun I've ever had in a video game. So just because a game puts a gun in the capacity to use it doesn't mean all the players are going to go in and use it that way. In that violence isn't the only thing that's fun about video games by any means. Let alone sometimes you'll have a game where it's meant to be a violent, like Hitman. Um, if you do the Hitman missions without using guns, there's ways you can do it without directly killing people, and you'll get bonuses for it. Where it's like if you cause an accident or something, because it's like you're still killing the person. Not to say that like causing an accident isn't horrible or fucking absolutely like it's definitely manslaughter or murder, but the way that they're doing it is like acknowledging that you don't have to shoot somebody or strangle them to do something. Like it's not assassination is obviously wrong. But I think even what they do in this game is they'll set you up to assassinate people who are like human trafficking or something. So then you're like, I know assassination is wrong, but he's trafficking people. And then you start getting in this morally
Oh yeah,
ambiguous where you're like, I don't know if I necessarily disagree with this situation. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and assassinate this guy because it does that in Cyberpunk too. There's like a human trafficker where you can let him go or you can kill him. And I'm like, nah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and kill this guy because it's like if given the option where you're in a situation in a video game where this person has done the things that they've done and you're like gonna be complicit with them walking free, I'm like, nah, this is not real. So I'm just gonna go ahead and off this dude. I know it's gonna have repercussions because that's how the developers made this game, but the repercussions may be good. I don't actually care because I don't like this guy and what he's done. So I'm just gonna go ahead and off him. And they gave me that choice. So like being able to do those things in a virtual environment, I think when somebody is in touch with reality enough to then not go do that in the real world, but also recognize the moral quandary that that scenario is meant to be. Because if I had just gone in and killed that dude with no second thought to it, that's also fucked up. Like,
yeah.
no matter what he's done, you can't just go in and fucking execute people like in reality. So even in virtual, you should still be thinking like, should I give this dude a second chance? Like, will he change? And then he proves he's not going to change.
This is kind of amusing to me because the games that I play seem to have a very low moral ambiguity factor. Like flying games where you're one is piloting a military aircraft and there's a military target, chances are that there's like absolutely no ambiguity about who is being attacked at that point and what one is doing. And then like Star Trek, at first there was some ambiguity because you go into the game thinking like, yeah, I'm gonna be a Starfleet captain, and then next thing you know you're a space assassin with like weird space wizard powers. And okay, it's not fun. And fortunately, like the things that you end up killing are like Borg or really nasty space entities or very clearly hostile aliens. And so there's also no ambiguity other than like if you go a layer deeper, you realize that they just don't want to engage in trade with the Federation, and the Federation is like, no, we want your resources, guys. Like, come on, just play nice. We'll give you this stuff. And they're like, we don't want your Federation trinkets. But nobody cares about that because, the Federation needs those resources. And they're going to send in like team after team of space assassins until they get the job done.
Which is why I always was of the mind that the scientists were the tip of the spear, even though they were not of that mind. They were not thinking that that's what they were doing, but the Federation always proved imperialist means or imperialist intentions.
Like, who cares if they're really nice about it? They're threatening like the most advanced technology in the galaxy. If you don't want to come off the resources.
Well, and then using Klingon expansion as an excuse.
Yeah. Man, what a great foil. Like, it's like, guys, if you don't accept the Federation, like, the Klingons will come after you. You don't want the Klingons to come after you.
It worked. It always worked. So, in those morally unambiguous contexts, well, okay, there's ambiguous characters within those, like Quark or Wei Yun.
Yeah.
But which like one? A Cyberpunk 2077 is all the characters are like that. There's constantly backstabbing, and you're constantly given the option to stab people in the back and double cross them, and sometimes literally stab them in the back. So it's like when that type of storyline is available in a virtual environment, we're almost at the holodeck point, but then you have people who get holodeck sickness before we even have holodecks and think that shit's too real, and then start to conflate that shit with reality. So that's where I'm, having grown up on video games, it's almost, I think we just got lucky in our progression of graphics based on computing power compared to the hyper Unreal that it started versus hyper real that it's gotten to. Having that progression allows people to distinguish the digital, whereas if you just jump into hyper real video games, I'm wondering if that fucks with people's wiring and it makes it more difficult for them to discern, because I think that's where you get a lot of, like, the idea of NPC talk being among regular people, like regular people talking about NPCs, regular people pretending to be NPCs on TikTok and shit. That's weird to me as a video gamer who grew up not even really knowing what an NPC was until I got into game design. So for people who aren't in game design or development, who aren't gamers, to be talking about NPCs, to be feeling like NPCs, is where the dehumanization that has come with virtualization and digitization, I think, has been hard for people to grasp in a way where it's almost like, I don't know if you've heard the story about when they first showed film in the theater, people saw the train and they like ran in fear that they thought the train was going to come through the screen. It's like we have a modern day equivalent of not knowing that if you're playing a video game, you're not going to be that person in the video game because it's too easy, especially when you get into first person. It's too easy to then identify with what's happening in that game and start having dreams even about what's going down in the game. So then you're like playing Far Cry or playing Call of Duty, and now suddenly you're having flashbacks in your dreams from a match that you lost, and now you're waking up in a cold sweat because you died in a match because your brain can't tell the difference from having been in that match because the visuals are so hyper real now that your brain is processing that stuff as if it's really happening to it, because our brains are not good at telling the difference between thinking about doing something and actually doing it, as we've come to find out um, when they do studies of brain activity when somebody does movements like martial arts movements versus when they think about those movements, the brain activity is almost identical. So the brain is not good at distinguishing reality from the mind's eye if what's happening in the mind's eye is realistic, it seems. So the more, this is where I'm like, as an avid video gamer, I just worry about kids
And
who
so
jump straight into
I
hyperrealism.
just discovered this game on that's yet to be released on Steam. It's called Unrecord, and it's presented from the perspective of the body
Oh
camera.
my God. Yeah, it's super
And
real.
it's man, I've watched a lot of body camera footage, and this is like probably the most realistic looking. If this is actually a video game, this is actually quite incredible. I mean,
It
this is
is. And I've seen the image of the guy going, or it's not an image, it's a video capture of him going from his desktop to the game to show that he's got the Unity
yeah.
engine open and that yeah, you can play it in Unity and it is in fact a video game.
And this is incredible. Like, this is the most incredible gameplay footage I think I've ever seen of a first person shooter. I absolutely cannot wait to play this game.
Well, and okay, the I watched a video of analysis of it, and the smartest shit he did with making it look realistic is to not show faces.
Yeah, all the
So
facial
like,
blur.
yeah, it's like a subconscious way of overcoming that uncanny valley, because we've seen so many videos of people having their faces blurred that he's playing off of our conditioning to make it seem more real, when that's like going in the opposite direction. So that's why it's like some of the smartest development
Oh
ever.
man, just the
When you look at
shading.
it, that's when you're like, oh, you can see the things that it's like clearly a video game. It's clearly done in Unity. If you start to look at the environment, it's so obvious
Yeah.
that it's a video
Well,
game.
it's
But
when
when
it's
you
in
look at,
motion. Like it's
right,
when
but I
things are in
mean,
motion, that's when it looks.
but even then, if you put it on full screen and like have it in the highest fidelity, it looks real. But until you start looking at things, and it's
Yeah.
because he he's smart enough to know that if you overstimulate, then you don't hyperfixate. And so by overstimulating the person watching the video, they're not going to start hyperfixating on like the contrast between an object sitting on the ground
Oh
and
yeah.
the
Well, I mean,
shadow and
surfaces,
things like that.
like the surfaces, once you look really close, some of them just don't look real at all.
Not at all.
And
And I
then,
think that's the genius of what he's done.
but this is incredible. Like this gameplay footage is just next level. I've never seen anything like this. Like oh man. Yeah, when he shoots somebody and they start to pixelate, that's a really nice touch. The blood spatter looks real, compared to I don't know what we've been exposed to in media, like movies and television. It's at least consistent with that. Going up the stairs, now it looks really digital. It's still incredible. Walking through a warehouse. This actually looks kind of like a worn out warehouse. Like, a lot like a worn out warehouse.
Yeah, and it's what's funny is like lay people when they saw it, they were like, "This isn't a video game. This is real." and they were on the opposite end where they thought somebody was faking that this was a video game, which is crazy.
Oh, that's like a total of there moment.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Which is also where, when I don't know if you saw that video of the guy wrestling the robot, where somebody's like, "Oh, MMA robot," and it's like obviously CGI.
Yeah, I saw
But you had a
that.
ton of people who thought it was real. Where I'm like, okay, there's like 15-year-old kids on the thread. Like, I'm 15. Give me like the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, okay, kid, you get the benefit of the doubt, but the fucking 35-year-old men on the thread don't. It's okay to fucking be tricked by some bad CGI if you're a kid, but if you're an adult, like, adults shouldn't be looking at Unrecord and being like, "This is real. Somebody faked a fucking video game," because that's a stupid ass fucking conclusion to have to have the idea that like somebody recorded this in real life and then put a filter on it to make it look like a video game to go viral. That's fucking stupid. That's really dumb, especially if you just look at it for a second. So like when those people were reacting to the video in that way, that's when I was like, oh fuck. I mean, not the only time, but it was one of the times when like media literacy is out of control. And I think we might have gone too far with hyper realism.
I'm serious, man. I think that there's a real big problem of people who happen to find the internet and figure out how to use a keyboard. Like, they just happen to find a terminal to access this stuff because, I don't know, it looks realistic, but it doesn't look like the real world. I've seen the real world through a multitude of cameras, and none of them look like a video game. Even like the lowest resolution video cameras still reproduce the real world in a way that video games still can't. They just can't. There's not enough processing power. there is just not enough processing power, guys. Sorry, your 12 GPU rig still can't render the Uncanny Valley perfectly. It just can't.
But even then, if you watch the video, the person, they're just running through and like blasting anybody they see. No fucking cop is gonna do that shit. We're not gonna have heard about it. Like, this rogue cop went in and got himself on body cam just blasting. He just
went in and Steven Seagal'd the place. No. So, in real body camera footage, they move really slowly, and then they move really fast a few feet, and then they move really slowly, and then they move really
warnings.
Yeah, and then they move really fast for a few feet, and they stage everything, and it takes forever for like teams to go through buildings, but they do it really safely because they don't want anyone to get hurt. Yeah. This game is definitely not that. It's like this is the one man critical incident response team. He's a one man. It's like if Rambo was the police officer, that's what this game would be, which is antithetical to Rambo. So, vengeance can't wear a badge, guys. Oh my god.
So when I see games like Unrecord being set up to get released, I'm like, I hope they give it an NC-17 or some shit. I never would have thought I would have hoped a game got an NC-17 rating. Do you remember Manhunt?
No.
I think that one got an NC-17, if I'm not mistaken. But it was just...
Oh, I do remember this game. That game definitely was
fucking stupid.
It was definitely worth, it's just got a mature rating.
Oh, mature. Yeah. I think mature is 17 up. Yeah. They might even have, you might have had to be 18.
Let's see what the ESRB ratings board. Mature 17 and up.
It's 17 and up, but I think when you bought it, you had to be 18 to buy it.
Oh, yeah.
Or not just that, anything that's mature rating.
Then there's AO, which is adult only, 18 and up. RP is rating pending. And RP, likely 17 plus, is another rating pending. That's a complex rating.
Yeah, I
Holy crap, there's a bunch of different content descriptors that are used. Alcohol reference, blood and gore, drug reference, intense violence, nudity,
well,
sexual content, sexual violence, strong lyrics, use of tobacco, use of drugs, violence,
I was
stimulated
21.
gambling.
I was 21 when Manhunt came out, and I remember thinking that it was too much when I was 21. And it was just such senseless violence where I definitely didn't finish the game, but I just remember being like actually disgusted in a game to where it stuck out in my mind that this long. But the idea of a kid ending up with that game was like disturbing to me in a way where I never thought I would be disturbed by the thought of a kid getting a game. And Grand Theft Auto isn't as nearly as bad as Manhunt, as you really have to kind of work to get into the adult situations in Grand Theft Auto. Like, you're not just gonna stumble into like fucking a prostitute. That's just not gonna happen. But you can. So a kid could eventually do that, but they'd have to be like looking for that type of shit in the first place. So that kid's gonna find something on the internet. Not to say that it's okay, but when a kid's determined to find some adult themed stuff, they're gonna do it. Like, I remember when heavy metal would come on HBO or whatever, and like you'd have to like look in the other room and see if your parents are coming, and it's like, oh, the nipples are on. You have to like get your hand on the remote, and when you're a kid, you end up watching stuff that you're not meant to watch, and sometimes you don't get caught. A lot of times they do, but like that's way different than being able to interact with stuff. And there's a level of active involvement that video games have. Not to say that somebody can't get fucked up watching something that's passive, but I think the ratings have made it way more difficult to. Well, that's not true with horror. Horror is like, especially if you go back and look at 80s horror, some of the stuff that's rated PG-13 and R might even get an X or like an NC-17 or an X today, just because it's so over the top, or basically a softcore porn masquerading as like a fucking
bloody titties slasher flicks. Yeah, I think the reason that Manhunt presents an issue is that it's projecting into a psychopath, a psychopathic killer.
Well, did you ever play it though?
No.
No, there's like no real storyline except it's like hunting people, and so it's like, imagine The Purge without a storyline, just the Purge parts. That's
Wait,
what
The
Manhunt
Purge has a
is.
storyline?
I mean, compared to Manhunt, yeah. It's like as if they only had the purging and none of the dialogue setting up the purging. That's what Manhunt is, which is why
America's full of run-down, broken Rust Belt towns where nobody cares and anything goes. In Carcer City, nothing matters anymore, and all that's left are cheap thrills. Wow, this sounds like a really fucking terrible novel.
Well, and it was super realistic. It wasn't
rush.
over the top.
The power to grant life and take it away for sport. Okay.
When you see Mortal Kombat deaths that are over the top, you're like, okay, this is like somebody got driven through the ground into a bed of spikes. That's like way over the top, and it's clearly not real. But with Manhunt, it was like realistic as fuck and shit that you could actually have happen or do to somebody in a way that you're never gonna fucking throw a fireball out of your hand and set somebody's head on fire. You're never gonna breathe fire and fucking set somebody on fire. You're never gonna rip out somebody's spine with one hand. That's just never gonna happen. But the shit in Manhunt, anybody could do it. And that's really fucked up. Where
So are you saying it's like a survival game then? In that regard?
Kind of.
Considering the things that one must do to survive in this kind of world?
Even Dead Before Daylight has more of a plot than this. And in those survival games, they're still over the top horror. It's not like realistic horror.
So this is okay. It's like basically just the ultra violence portions of Grand Theft Auto, basically.
Yes.
A game entirely composed of ultra violence.
All the ultra violence. Only
the ultra violence. There's no real story other than survive. Use whatever whatever means necessary.
Like the stuff that they were forcing Alex to watch, that's what it was basically. And just like repeated over and over. Like you die. Wow, somebody literally says in the Wikipedia that Manhunt is the Clockwork Orange of video games.
Why would anyone want to do that?
That's exactly what it is. And it's funny that that's the thing that came to mind for me, but that's also in the description or in the Wikipedia description, because that's I don't know of any other game. I'm sure there's other games like that. But compared to like Grand Theft Auto, even, it's just so distasteful.
I don't understand a game that punishes the player. I guess.
Maybe it's for fucking masochists that really enjoy violence.
They just want to feel like they're being punished for 6 hours and 10 minutes, because apparently that's how long it takes to run through that game. According to YouTube, you can get through that game in 6 hours and 10 minutes.
Which is a perfect example as to, like, if it's that short, that's not a real game.
No. Why would anybody do that to themselves for that long repeatedly? 6 hour punishment session starts now. What the hell? That seems like that's not a game.
Well, they banned it in some places.
Fucking good.
But they did that. They did that with Grand Theft Auto 3. I think it was 3. It was maybe 3 or 4, but then they unbanned it by then making it so that you couldn't kill cops, which is where I'm like, that makes sense. If you're a society that thinks that specific thing is over the line and you have laws against it, allowing it in a video game isn't really consistent. So the idea that Americans have this extra law against killing cops, but you can go do it in video games anymore, every game damn near allows you to kill cops, and they're just going to come back at you hard. But I'm not necessarily against, if it's on the market, if it's being sold, I'm not against the government that regulates that market stepping in and saying, you can't sell this thing in this manner. Because if you just want it to be a cop killing simulator, you can just put that out or just have it yourself. You don't need to fucking make money off of it. But the idea that you could put out a simulator to make money, mock killing these people that are then supposed to like protect your right to do that. Well, I don't necessarily blame the government for then coming out and not allowing that to be sold, because not allowing it to be sold doesn't mean it can't exist. So it's just a matter of you can't monetize virtual killing cops. Like I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't think everything should be able to be monetized, because then there's no line, and then suddenly we're monetizing fucking slave wages and slave labor again. And that's where, you know, there has to be lines drawn. Which the issue with Manhunt is it was meant for adults, but it was ending up in kids' hands one way or another. And I know that shit was happening for a fact. So I'm not naive enough to think that the market is going to be able to regulate itself well enough so that kids don't end up playing Manhunt. They're just not that good. Or kids are going to end up playing Grand Theft Auto. So in that reality, I want to be able to give companies some level of regulation as a wall, because then kids are going to be able to go download mods anyway. So if Grand Theft Auto got regulated by the government, a smart kid is going to be able to figure out how to download the mod to go kill cops if that's what they want to go do. But it's only once the hurdle's there, you got to really want to go do that thing. And there's many, like, if somebody wants to kill cops that bad in a video game, now we got a lot of questions to ask. It's not just about that kid anymore. Like, what's putting them in that mindset?
Man, like when I played GTA, I want to avoid the police as much as possible, because that's the whole point. If you're committing crimes, you don't want to engage the police at all. It's like, shit, the police are coming. Guys, we got to get the fuck out of here. That's what's supposed to happen. It's not like, hey, let's stick around and become legendary and die. Or even get into a car and cause, like, untold damages. That's the other part. Lead a high speed chase.
So that's one of the things that we would specifically do when we would play in groups, is like, see how long can you last on 6 stars?
Yeah. Everybody hole up in an industrial district where you have good coverage and can move around and hold them off. It's like what is it? Modern Warfare, when you fight the zombie Nazis and they just keep coming wave after wave.
But I feel like the irony there is somebody who's media literate would go through that, like myself, and realize how stupid it is to be like trying to run from the cops or trying to like take on the military or some shit.
Yeah,
whereas like when you do it virtually, you see like the futility of it.
Yeah, the standoff only results in they just keep coming.
Yes, exactly.
And the standoff never works. Your only hope is to run, and just like Morpheus said, you don't want to take the interstate. Got to lose them in town.
Even if you're able to fly, go somewhere where you get a plane or a helicopter, they're gonna shoot your ass down, because at that point you got a fucking flying vehicle that's become a potential threat. They don't know your mind state, so they would rather shoot your ass down than let you keep flying and get away. In some cases, so like that, the reality of the way that star system works, like I said, media literacy is going to have you coming away with that. Like, don't do crime.
Yeah, it's that simple.
Even though I was just engaged with the fucking 100% crime simulator, the end result is don't do crime. And that is not the same end result as somebody who doesn't have enough literacy to like recognize that they never get away from 6 stars. I think there's only been like a couple times in my entire life where ever actually, um, I don't know if I got away so much as did something and it reset. I don't know. I don't know if it. I don't know if they stop. But
The
I think
only way that I've ever gotten away is to go off road and somehow have a vehicle that can climb up over everything that the police vehicles can't climb over, and then drive that thing back down the other side of a mountain to a place that the helicopters won't follow you. And even then, you end up dying.
Yeah, because even if you go in a tunnel, they're gonna send some shit in there.
Like, yeah, even if you go into a tunnel, fuck, a train will hit you if you go into a tunnel.
Yeah, I don't think there's any getting away.
No, and
without using a cheat code.
Yeah, you just. I think a dirt bike and then climbing up the mountain is like the closest that I've ever gotten to escaping. But it's just as easy to take the wrong line and not be able to go up and then tumble down to your death. At least GTA makes it really easy to die doing stupid things. Like,
yeah,
really easy for the tune to die, because otherwise it wouldn't actually be as fun. I think part of the fun is that it's so easy in that game for just through normal gameplay just to be off a little bit in the timing, and it's like, whoops, that I'll do it again. I'll get it next time. But
well, you're nailing something. I think for whatever reason, fun requires risk in a lot of situations. So it's like, I don't know what the various levels of risk. It's like, for something to actually be fun, something needs to be at risk.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Some of the most fun periods or times that I was played EVE Online, it was right after I'd finished building some really expensive spaceship and then go exploring in a place where I could definitely lose it if I just screwed up, like just barely messed up. And then I end up coming out of it with like, untold riches from the wormhole that completely allow me to finance like the next 10 ships that I need to build. Like, that's the cool stuff. And then I go out the next time thinking I can do this again, then I lose that ship. But at least I have, resources for the next 10 ships. So that's kind of cool how that can work out. I don't know. There's some games where the risk is low. They're fun, like Tetris.
I mean, but there's still risk. You can still bust, and I think that even then, if Tetris just kept on going, and if you hit the top, there was no end, and it just kept going. I don't know if people.
Oh no, that wouldn't be any fun. Yeah, no, that's true.
Right. You see what I'm saying? Like, even it's still super low risk, but there's still, like, you don't want to hit the top. Don't hit the top. Oh, no, you're getting close. And like, once you get close, your heart starts fucking racing.
Shit.
And you're like, why is my heart racing over this stupid fucking like shape about to hit this line? But it's because you're almost about to lose.
And then you press a key just 1 millisecond too long, and the block shifts over one more, and it's too close, and it sets in the wrong place. And now you got 2 open spaces to deal with next time. That shit sucks too. That's the worst, when it almost fits perfectly, but for whatever reason did not happen. You sneeze on the rotate button.
Can't have winning without losing, apparently.
Man, who knew Tetris had so much at stake?
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.